What if your software gave the wrong data that ended up killing over 150 kids in a school?
We were not involved. I think to suggest that Palantir bears some responsibility for what happened there is wrong.
Is it? No, genuinely, because don't they use
that is my understanding.
And then the obvious other very controversial use of your software, immigration enforcement in the US, which many the world over saw as being brutal and inhumane. Is there not a moral judgment there for Palantir?
I don't think it's appropriate for unelected, self-appointed tech bosses to decide what is democratic or what is lawful.
But do you understand when people look at you and say, you're choosing profit over morality here? Palantir is one of the world's most powerful yet controversial tech companies. In the US, its software underpins everything from military operations to immigration enforcement. And here in the UK, it says its technology has helped cut NHS waiting lists. But does that justify giving mounds of sensitive British data to an American company with roots in surveillance and defence? Well, I put those questions and many more to the company's UK boss. Louis Mosley, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Yesterday, the technology secretary, in the middle of Tech Week, praising technology everywhere, chose the moment to say of your company that she didn't agree with its right-wing bosses. Today, during PMQs, the Prime Minister, in the middle of a crisis week, was asked whether or not he was going to cut his contract with the NHS. Why do you think that Palantir is getting it from all sides at the moment? Why is everybody criticising and coming down on you and wanting you out of Britain?
Well, there is a lot of noise online. There is, as you say, some noisy figures in Parliament. But if we just take the comments by Liz Kendall, the Technology Secretary, actually our Chief Executive is not right-wing. He's a card-carrying Democrat and was a major donor to the Biden and Harris campaign. So it's an example, I think, of really why this is happening, which is it's misinformation. It's
Perhaps she's talking about Peter Thiel, though.
She may have been talking about Peter Thiel, our chairman, who has right-wing views. But again, this is really my point: is Palantir is not politically monolithic. We don't represent party politics. We're neither right-wing nor left-wing. We have the full spectrum of political views within the company, and that's epitomised by our chief executive having, frankly, left-wing views, and our chairman having right-wing views.
But your chief executive has some unusual views, shall we say. I'm just looking down here. Your CEO, Alex Karp, as you know, has said on one occasion that the company exists on occasion to kill people. He published his manifesto not very long ago in which he said, and I quote, "The West's dominance comes not from its values but from its superiority in applying organised violence," among other things. Yes, he's a Democrat. Yes, he's funded Biden and Harris. But he says things like that make people uncomfortable. What do you say to that?
He is outspoken. That is definitely the case. But I also think he, as a private citizen, is entitled to have his own views. And I think we can make a separation between what are the personal views of an individual who works for a company from what the company represents. And I think it's dangerous when we elide those things, because in the end it comes back to is the company delivering? Is it doing what the government has contracted it to do? In our case, the NHS has contracted us to help make patients' lives better. It means getting more operations, it means getting people discharged from hospital faster. And I think that's what we need to be judged on, not on the views of any individual that works for the company.
But when they are his personal point of views, but he is talking about the company and saying the company exists on occasion to kill people. And the problem is your software is used in Iran and potentially Gaza, where it is killing people.
And it's also used in Ukraine, it's used by NATO, it's used by the British Armed Forces. The origins of the company were in defence and intelligence, and we remain very proud of that.
But do you see that's the issue, isn't it? When he says our company exists, yes, to kill people. It's quite a frivolous thing to say when your software is being used to target and kill people, in particular in Iran, where on day number 1, as you know, a school was blown up in Minab with wrong targeting data, and we do not yet know whether or not your company was at the heart of that mistake.
And I understand why when someone uses words like that, it makes people feel uncomfortable. But I don't think it's frivolous. I think it's meant very seriously. And in fact, it's a reflection of how seriously we take these things at Palantir. We know that our software is used to do some of the most important, dangerous, consequential things, whether that is on the battlefield or, frankly, in a hospital operating theatre. And so the bar for Palantir's engineers is very, very high, and we take that extremely seriously.
But why is it okay, though, to say that sometimes our software will kill people? And the idea being that he was okay with that. Is that okay? Because doesn't that go to the heart of your problem here in the UK? You're hearing it time and time again, that your software and the company's values and the things that your bosses say don't adhere to British values. It is a value thing.
So I think our armed forces deserve all the support they can get. And we provide and have provided our software to the British Armed Forces for well over a decade now. And in defence, we can talk around these issues, but sometimes I think it benefits everyone to be very frank about how the software is used and what it's used for. And I don't think we should shy away from that.
But what if your software gave the wrong data that ended up killing over 150 kids in a school? That's the heart of the issue here.
Well, on that specific example, we can wait for what the American government makes public about how that incident came about. We were not involved. I think to suggest that Palantir bears some responsibility for what happened there is wrong.
Is it? No, genuinely, because don't they
that is my understanding. I am not obviously read into the details, and we need to wait to find out from the American government fully once the investigation has taken place. However, what I would say is our software is the audit trail for these things. So it tracks end to end every bit of data, every individual who's seen that data, every decision that's taken as a result of that information throughout the whole life cycle of the decision on the battlefield. Now, if you go back in the past, we talk about the fog of war. You think how these decisions have been made in previous conflicts from the Second World War onwards. How many mistakes are made, how many misunderstandings occur, how easy that is when you don't have the information you need at your fingertips, you don't have that full visibility. What our software does is provide that visibility today. So it doesn't mean you can prevent errors from occurring. Humans will always make mistakes. But what you can do is understand exactly what information they had when that decision was made. And that's, I think, a very important step in, frankly, making war a more transparent and a more auditable thing.
But just so our viewers are clear, Maven, the system that is embedded in the Department of War in America that they use on the battlefield, they were very open about that at the time, your system does provide them with targets. And one of those targets might have been that school where those children were killed. We don't know the outcome of the investigation, but it's not wrong for us to ask that question of you.
Well, I think it's important to make a distinction about what they're using our software to do. Our software is not being used to take the decision. It is always a human who makes that decision. What they are doing is using our software to sift through the mountain of information that exists about the battlefield. Images from satellites, strings and strings of numbers, billions of rows of digits coming off radars. How do you start to synthesize that, make sense of it, so that someone who's having to make, frankly, a life and death decision has all of the information that's available at their fingertips when they take that decision? And crucially, that is all captured and auditable in a historic record that can be checked forever.
But you provide the list of targets, no?
So our software is used to generate a list of targets, but it is not Palantir that makes the decision. It's always a human.
No, but you could have provided them with that target, and that target has then ended up.
So our software is used to generate the targets, but it's not Palantir providing the targets.
Right, but the list of targets has come from Palantir. So it could end up in this investigation that you gave them that school to hit erroneously. It
would not have been Palantir that gave any target. It would be the software in which the target was identified, prioritized, and prosecuted. So that workflow, if you like, is what our software supports. But it's not the decision-making engine. That's always a human.
But are you worried about that? Are you worried about your company's involvement in that horrific mistake?
Well, like I said, I am not read into the details, and we need to wait to find out from the American government what happened there. So I don't know, frankly, whether we were or were not involved, and I'm waiting to hear, like everyone, what the results of that investigation are.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, that is a classified matter that therefore only a cleared US citizen would ever have any access to, and I imagine it's also a very closely held matter within the US military.
There's some controversy as to whether or not your software has been used in Gaza post-October the 7th. Was it or was it not used?
So this is, again, another example of some of this misinformation that circulates online. So, I mean, as you'll know, there are 2 systems that are reported to be used by the Israelis in Gaza for targeting purposes, neither of which we're involved in.
So your software was not used categorically in any post-October the 7th operation in Gaza?
So the 2 systems that have been publicly reported to have provided the targeting in Gaza, neither of them use Palantir software.
But Israel and the IDF do use Palantir software?
That's correct.
Is it the case that they might not tell you that they're using it in operations in Gaza? Would it not seem unusual that they weren't?
I can give you an example of the kind of work we do support. Well, our software was used to identify, track and locate missing hostages.
But had nothing to do with tracking down terrorists?
Neither of the 2 systems that were used for targeting used Palantir software.
So you can say that categorically?
Yes.
But you do know it was used to track down hostages?
Yes.
Okay. And then the obvious other very controversial use of your software, as you all know, is immigration enforcement in the US, which many the world over saw as being brutal and inhumane. What's your view on that? Are you comfortable with your software being used as part of that operation?
So I think the important thing to remember is Trump was elected in 2024 with a big democratic mandate to pursue an immigration policy, which he has pursued. So that was tested at the ballot box in America, and the overwhelming view of the public in America was support for that policy. We have worked with ICE since President Obama was the person who first gave us a contract with ICE, and that work has continued under his leadership, under President Biden's leadership, under presidents of both parties. The world that you're describing, where I might be uncomfortable with doing that work, or Palantir might walk away from doing it, is one where, in effect, unelected, self-appointed bosses of tech companies would be deciding which policies a democratically elected government can or can't pursue. I don't think that's our role.
But would that not be your company taking a moral stance, putting morals over profit, as some people would see it? That if you see that your software is being used to go after people based on their immigration status, and in some instances to be shot dead in the street, is there not a moral judgment there for Palantir?
I don't want to live in a world where unelected, self-appointed tech bosses get to decide which policies a government can or can't pursue, where that government is democratically elected and subject to the rule of law. And I think in America, there are many concerns about the Trump administration, but I don't think anyone is yet arguing that America has ceased to be democratic or ceased to be subject to the rule of law.
I mean, some people are arguing that.
They are arguing it, and it will be tested in the courts. And I think that's the appropriate place. Again, I don't think issues like that should be resolved in company boardrooms. They should be resolved at the ballot box and in courtrooms.
But at no point when you saw that and saw what was going on and the horror that was felt about that around the world, at no point did that make you and Mr. Karp and people that run this company feel uncomfortable?
Absolutely, of course it did. We had a very live debate internally about it.
And what was the nature of that debate?
Well,
should we or should we not have our software running this show?
I think, like everyone who watched those videos that circulated on social media, impossible not to have a visceral reaction to them. But we need to be able to detach ourselves from that and say, whatever.
Why do you, though?
Well, whatever I might feel personally, it is not my place to decide whether that policy is correct and whether what happened was lawful or not.
But it is if it's run on your software. You do have a decision. You could say, end of contract. We cannot
But then you are
allow this to happen in our name, because it was
But
your
then-
name
but the-
became, you became famous at the beginning of this year, partly because of that.
But then I think we would be countermanding a decision that was taken at the ballot box. We would be, in effect, calling time on democracy. And I think that's an unbelievably slippery slope.
But the American people for the large part, or many of them, did not approve of the immigration crackdown. Yes, they voted him in democratically because he said that he would bring down immigration. I don't think anybody thought that he was going to bring down immigration in the way that he did and in what subsequently unfolded on the streets of Minneapolis.
And
did you?
You may be right about that. But again, I think the accountability for that has to rest in the ballot box, not in a company boardroom. I don't think it's appropriate for unelected, self-appointed tech bosses to decide what is democratic or what is lawful.
But do you understand when people look at you and say, you're choosing profit over morality here? Is that a fair criticism?
No, I think I would reject that strongly. I think we are...
Because you're making money off the back of this crackdown.
Well, we are standing for democracy and for the rule of law. We're standing for what
but
I
what's
think
democratic about immigrants, migrants being gunned down in the street in broad daylight?
Well, what would be profoundly undemocratic would be for a company like Palantir to decide unilaterally that it won't support a policy that has widespread democratic support in the United States. I think that would be to undermine the very fabric of Western values, which is built on liberal democracy and the rule of law.
Here, the NHS contract, as you know, there's a break clause, isn't there, later this year. A committee of MPs have called for the contract to be rescinded. The NHS itself is reviewing the contract. Do you think that you will still be running that contract this time next year?
That is not for me to decide. Again, that will be for the elected politicians of this country to decide.
Can you understand that people are worried about a US tech firm, for all the reasons we've just discussed, being so deeply embedded inside a national institution like the NHS, with the access to the data that you have?
So there are a lot of noisy people online. There's a lot of noise in Parliament, as you alluded to. And I think a lot of this is based on misinformation. So, for example, the concern around access to data. Palantir doesn't have access to data. It's the NHS's data. The NHS is simply using our software to process that data. But Palantir does not have access to it. Palantir doesn't control it, can't monetize it. It is entirely under the NHS's control. So that would be the first point.
And that's, as you look me in the eyes, there is no way that any of you have access to patient data?
It's entirely under the NHS's control. It both under the law, but also physically, they control access to it. So
But you build the system. At some juncture, you have access to that data, and I believe there was a report in the FT that said at one point your engineers, were given, I can't remember the wording, but it was something like universal access or access to all data, which I know you went online to refute. But it has to be the case that as you become more and more embedded in the NHS, that you can see the data. You're using the data to integrate it with other data. You can't be doing that with a blindfold on.
Well, we have no more access to it than, say, Microsoft has access to the contents of a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet that you might be using at home.
Really? When you
Yes.
drill down to X patient needing an appointment and cancer diagnosis, and I mean, I would hope that you would have more. How can you possibly improve waiting lists and put people in beds and move things around the way that you say you do without having that access to personal data?
I can categorically reassure you that we don't. It is fundamental to the way our software works, our business model, and frankly, the way the law works in this country. We do not have access. It is the NHS's data, and the NHS controls it.
Why do you think people are so nervous about it then? Do you think they're just drawing a dotted line to Iran and ICE and Gaza and just thinking, we just don't want that company running our NHS here. We just don't like the smell of them. Is that what it is?
Well, I think there's a lot of misinformation online, like, for example, that Palantir has access to data. And I understand why that would provoke immediate visceral concern in people because, of course, our medical records are some of the most sensitive data that exists. And so the idea that a stranger might be able to see that, or you might not know whose eyes are on it, is going to be very, very concerning. But I can categorically reassure people that it's false. The NHS controls their data. Palantir does not have access to it.
And the idea that you might be able to, behind the scenes, slice and dice that data, move it along, use it for other potentially nefarious means, Categorically.
Categorically, false. It's not the way our software works. It would be against the law, and it's not our business model. It's not how we make money.
Because there was a report, wasn't there, forgive me, I can't remember where, but that somehow you were able to help target migrants in America as part of the ICE enforcement through Medicaid data, which starts alarm bells ringing that you're using one piece of data, potential medical data, to earmark people for another part of the government. That's probably part of the concern here, isn't it? That you have access to this treasure trove of sensitive data, and that at some juncture, next year, the year after, 5 years down the line, when you're even more embedded, you could use that data for other means.
No, and I understand why people are very concerned about NHS data and who has access to it. But I think this is the critical point. It's not Palantir. It's the NHS. It's the NHS's data. The NHS control it. The NHS decides who gets to see it. If it's going to be shared with another government organisation, that is entirely the NHS's decision. Palantir has no say in that, has no technical ability to even act upon that.
And what about this idea that a British company, Couplers Trust, I think Leeds and Manchester, have said they don't want your software and that they believe it wouldn't help them, and in fact that other bits of software that they already use can do it better than you? And this idea that MPs have said we need British companies to be running and doing the work behind the scenes in the NHS.
I would love to see more British companies working in AI. Oh, absolutely, I would. And Palantir is actually doing something about it. I mean, we 20%, so 1 in 5 of our employees around the world are here in Britain. Many of them go on to start new companies, tech companies. In fact, one of the largest AI companies that's been founded in the last 4 or 5 years in the UK, 11 Labs, was started by a couple of Palantir engineers who were working on the NHS project. So we're a major contributor to the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem here in the UK. We're a major employer, and we're a major, major magnet for technical talent from all over the world that we bring to this country.
So why then, I mean, if you spell it out like that, why are MPs so nervous about you? Why do they think that once you get your claws into the NHS and you're locked in, that if next year they decide they want to exercise the break clause, that they won't be able to?
Well, I think a lot of it is founded on misunderstandings about the company, about our business model, about data and what we have access to. And once those misunderstandings are cleared up and clarified, in my experience, these concerns tend to disappear.
But you don't seem to be able to clear them up. In fact, they seem to be growing on a day-by-day basis.
Well, I would disagree with that. I think there are some noisy MPs in Parliament, there are some noisy people online. But if you were to go and talk to the people who use our software, of whom there are tens of thousands across the public sector here in Britain, if you were to talk to the doctors, the nurses, the soldiers, the sailors, the police officers who are doing their jobs every day in our software, I think you would hear a very, very different story.
What if we were to talk to Sadiq Khan? You're suing him, you've said, this week. Palantir is suing him because he didn't want your company to win the 50 million contract with the Met. Why are you suing him? I mean, he doesn't want them to use you, so what?
So we're considering legal proceedings at the moment. It's not quite accurate to say that we are suing him. But I was disappointed by his decision. I think we have proven over the last 4 or 5 months the value that we can bring to the Met. We have helped them with their professional standards, which is to say identifying Met police officers who are, frankly, criminals or who are breaking rules. And that's been an extremely successful project. And now we wanted to help the Met extend the use of that technology to investigate not just criminals that might be in Met police uniforms, but to criminals more broadly across London. And that, unfortunately, is what the Met is no longer going to be able to do.
2 things there. There's a criticism that you have twice now, once with the Met, gone in and said, let's show you how wonderful we are, how we can work. The NHS, allegedly, that's what you did around the COVID time. And then you try and transfer that into a multi-million-dollar contract, pound contract, where other people aren't necessarily invited to contract for the business too. That's, he says, the London mayor, the problem with the contract with the Met, that they basically didn't do it the right way. that they were potentially just handing it over to you because you'd already got in there to do some work for them? I don't know if it was pro bono, but you tell me.
Well, that unfortunately is a question I can't answer because it's a question for the Met. They get to decide the procurement process. We as a supplier can only respond to the process that they lay out. It's not something that we can influence in any way. But if I could just come back to the point around the NHS, it's often forgotten that for the Federated Data Platform, which is the large multi-100 million pound contract that we now have with the NHS, they ran an 18-month-long open competitive tender to identify us in the end as the very best supplier on the market for the specific requirements that they were seeking. And that had 30 independent assessors. Every tech company that you can think of applied. And we won it on merit.
Fair enough. But that was the accusation for the Met, certainly, in Sadiq Khan's own words, that I'm just checking here, that the Met had breached procurement rules, that essentially you were the only ones who'd been offered the contract. But anyway, why are you suing him? Just because you don't like his decision? I mean, again, is that how Palantir operates? You don't like the decision? You don't like being told you can't have the contract? So you sue them with all your might?
As I said, we're exploring legal proceedings. We are not yet suing.
But just what's the rationale for that, whether you do or whether you don't? The fact that you're considering that.
Because we have concerns. We have concerns about how that decision-making process might have been undertaken.
Which are?
It's a matter for the lawyers at the moment, so I'm afraid I can't comment further on that.
But do you think it's more of a values judgment rather than what they say is a breach of procurement rules? Are you worried about his motivation for blocking you out of the contract?
I am worried, and there were briefings around the Mayor's office to that effect, that this was a decision based on values. And I think that is, again, a dangerous step. Procurement should be done on the basis of quality, performance, value for money, not on highly subjective measures like values.
On values, there has also been talk about an extension of your defence contract. You were a customer of Global Counsel, Peter Mandelson's lobby firm. He still owned that lobby firm when he became the ambassador to the United States in DC. There was a meeting at one point where he was introduced to, the Prime Minister was introduced to Alex Karp. It wasn't minuted. I was in DC at the time. I don't think press were invited. But nonetheless, months later, you had your extension of your defence contract. That doesn't sit comfortably for a lot of people, that the lobby firm run by the ambassador gets you in, you meet the Prime Minister. It sounds all very cosy and some would say cash for access.
Well, something else I would be very eager to clear up. Firstly, that visit of the Prime Ministers to our office in DC was open. The media were invited. I'm sorry if that invitation never made it to you.
No.
It was not us doing the inviting. It was number 10 Downing Street. But it was very much with the media in attendance. And it was, in fact, a press call. It was a photo shoot for the Prime Minister. So, first thing. Second thing, Peter Mandelson, as we have now seen as a result of these disclosures, says categorically in an email that he is reluctant to intervene on Palantir, and this is in reference to work that we are doing with the Ministry of Defence. And so I think we now have it categorically in black and white that he was not doing the things that some people have alleged he was.
Well, because he says so.
And he says so. And also we have, of course, the Defence Secretary here, John Healey, on the record saying the decision to extend that contract with us for the Ministry of Defence was his decision and his decision alone.
Our viewers watching you who are nervous about Palantir for whatever reason, whether it's misinformation, loud MPs, just what's your message to soothe a worried British public about your presence in our ecosystem, in the NHS, in the police, in defence, about to get even deeper in the defence? What's your message to them?
I understand people's concerns, but what I would ask them to do is focus on, are we delivering? We have helped the NHS deliver 110,000 operations which would not otherwise have happened. So those are people up and down the country who've had their hip replacement, who've had their knee surgery, who would not otherwise have had it were it not for our software. We've helped over 300,000 people get discharged from hospital faster. We're helping Bedfordshire Police identify over 1,000 women who are at risk of domestic violence that they had not previously discovered in their systems, and who the Chief Constable, these are his words, not mine, means he thinks there are now women alive in Bedfordshire who would not be otherwise were it not for the software. So you might have concerns about the way other countries use our software. You've mentioned America, you've mentioned Israel. But I would ask people to focus on, are we delivering for people in this country? Because I think that's what really matters.
There's one last thing I haven't asked you. Your grandfather is obviously Oswald Mosley. Do you think in any way that you're being unfairly judged because of him and because of your family history?
I don't see what relevance my grandparents have to me or what I do.
Well, he was a famous fascist.
Well, I would like people to judge me on my merits and not make assumptions about me based on who I might be related to.
I agree with you, but do you think they are?
I think that's a question for other people.
Louis Mosley, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
To us.
Great.